I know, I was expecting a bit more than that. Obviously no one cares that I was ill, fair enough. I won't say it again then. I was meant to be here, not preaching, but I was meant to be here, and just, I've had a rough week with illness. And if you didn't know, thank you. If you didn't know, I am training for an Ironman. Don't know if you've heard of an Ironman before. It's basically a big triathlon. And this week I haven't been able to train, so I felt like I've been basically doing nothing, which has meant I've had time to prepare my message. No, not that. But usually, although I've had time this week, does that mean that I started on Monday? Of course it doesn't. 2 weeks ago, I was sat in Swansea.com Stadium. I know. You would know that I am a Cardiff City fan, but I was asked by Tony McCarthy to go and watch Swansea. To clarify, I didn't pay for a ticket. I would never pay for a ticket to go and watch Swansea. But Tony said he had 2 spare tickets. And me and Alex, we decided that we were going to go last minute. And Swansea did win. I know, unfortunate. It's so weird being in an environment where you actually don't support what everyone else is doing. Everyone's cheering, everyone's celebrating when Swansea are making a good tackle or a good pass, or they're playing the Swansea way, which is just like really good passing but can't score a goal. Anyway, no one cares about the actual football. But my body was showing me being supportive. I had to be. I was scared. One tangent by here. I couldn't believe they're in a stadium. You've got seat 70, seat 71, and then seat 74. That'd only happen in Swansea, wouldn't it? Like it doesn't even make sense. Sorry to all those people from Swansea, but when I was there, I just couldn't believe it. But I had to pretend that I was there to support Swansea. My body was showing me being supportive. My heart was doing something completely different. And although that's a good way to start the story, or to start the sermon, sometimes we can be like that as well. Where although our body is looking like we're doing something in support, our heart is feeling, saying something completely the opposite. Sometimes even in worship we can do that, can't we? Maybe you've had a rough week and you feel like you have to be here and you have to act like your worship is your normal worship. Because I can't show anyone what's going on in my heart, because if anyone ever saw what's going on in my heart, I wouldn't be standing on the stage anymore. I wouldn't be leading in ministry anymore. I want to read this story to you, and I have to read all of it. And there's no shame in reading all of this story. It's 23 verses. But I felt like once I've read it, I haven't got much more to say. Let me start my timer as well, just so I know where I'm at. I felt like I had to share all the story, and almost like, I'm not even sure I have to do much explanation to the story. Mark 7 it is. So if you have got a Bible, it would be awesome if you would go to it. Only because 23 verses. If you're going to watch me for 23 verses, I ain't that fun. Mark 7, I'm going to read from verse 1. This is what it says. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as of the washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. Interesting. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders, instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" He replied, this is Jesus, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is korban, that is, devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father or mother. This, you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And you do many things like that. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. Are you so dull, he asked? Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out the body. He went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. Do you know, I love how Jesus responds to the Pharisees. Not because I love how harsh he is, but because I realize that when he's talking to the Pharisees, part of it is that he's actually talking to me as well. Because I'm exactly like the Pharisees in my religious tradition, in the way that I want things to be done, in the times that I've missed Jesus in those situations. And the fact that the Pharisees thought that they were doing something good, that almost makes it worse, doesn't it? How many of us think that we're doing something good sometimes, but actually we're going against the very thing that God has told us to do? How many times have we acted like Pharisees? Probably all the time. How many times have we turned from God? All the time. We're in constant pursuit against ourselves, because self is always the problem. Because self doesn't always want to drive us towards Jesus. Self wants to drive us away from Jesus. So the Pharisees create extra laws. Not just what they've read in the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible, but they've created extra laws. And in their tradition, they're like, if you follow this, it'll lead you closer to God. God didn't even say that. So if you wash your hands correctly, let's try and make this really simple now. If you wash your hands correctly, maybe you follow the signpost that's in the toilet and it says, wash your hands for 20 seconds, hot water, make sure you got the soap. They're adding that and saying you have to do that so that you're closer to God. Jesus is like, what are you on about? The problem isn't that you have dirty hands. The problem is that you've got a dirty heart. And that's the problem. The problem isn't that the disciples got bad hands. The problem is that they've got bad hearts. Do you know the Pharisees? They were highly offended and they were highly offensive. Let me tell you what I mean. They were always offending people all the time. Because they were always saying, oh, well, you didn't do that right. You didn't wash your hands right. You didn't pray right that way. You said the wrong word. But the moment that there was pushback, they were offended. How can you speak to me like that? Someone who's honored by God? When Jesus pushes back, you see there's an element of them going, who do you think he is? How can he tell me what to do? But they didn't care about offending people, but they always took offense. I wonder if some of us are like that, though. Where we don't care about what we say. We don't care about, how much it might affect this person. But if someone pushes back, if someone might say something in defense or just push back to your idea, oh, I'm offended now. Don't we live in a culture where everyone's offended? I could say something on the stage and after it, someone's offended. Now, that's obviously never happened, has it? Obviously, I've never offended anyone in my life. Of course I have. Obviously, I have. But we're in a generation where we're offended all the time. And we're offensive all the time. Just exactly like the disciples. But Jesus is always pushing back. He's always pushing back to the Pharisees, but he's always pushing back on us as well. I don't know about you, but sometimes you get those thoughts and you're like, is God saying this? And then I reflect and I go, well, does the Bible say that? Jesus, what are you saying? And usually, when I'm thinking about something like around church or how I want it to be done in my way, the problem isn't usually the thing that's going on. The problem is usually what's going on inside me, in my heart. The issue isn't actually the lights, the worship, the person talking, the welcome, how long or how short church is, whether it's light, whether it's dark, whether we have food before or after, or whether there's no coffee or tea. Usually the issue is the heart posture. Jesus didn't go, you should have coffee before church, or you should have coffee after church. He didn't say you should eat before or you should eat after, or you should start with welcome or you shouldn't start with welcome in church, or you should sing 12 songs or you should sing half a song. He doesn't give us guidance in that. Now, we all have preference, but the preference is usually tradition. Because what I prefer doesn't mean that that's biblical. And what you prefer doesn't mean that it's biblical. And sometimes when there's a dispute in church, I've probably said it. Something happens, there's a situation going on, and someone goes, well, we didn't do it like this before. Well, it's always been done this way. Okay. Is it? Like, you know, I'm all for people having preferences, and me more than anyone else. I have a lot of preferences. I have a lot of things that I like. But unless it's biblical, we can't hold too tightly to those things, because it's just tradition, it's just preference, and there's nothing wrong with preference. I support Cardiff, and there is some things wrong with me supporting Cardiff, but there's nothing wrong with me having a preference in supporting a football team, just like there's nothing wrong with Tony McCarthy supporting every football team in Wales. Now, I don't agree with that. But that's his tradition, that's his preference, and my preference is you can only support one team in Wales. None of that's biblical. None of it's unbiblical. But I'm saying that we don't hold so strongly to those things that I say, well, I got to wear my Cardiff top, and Tony can't wear any other football top in this church, because we're closest to Cardiff, and we must support Cardiff. If you support another Premier League team, that's fine, but your Cardiff team, or your Welsh team, must be Cardiff. No. Why does it matter? And sometimes we get so bogged down in tradition that we actually forget the cross. I think sometimes we get into a rhythm of forgetting the reason why we're actually here. And we spend too much time going, oh, well, I like this about church today. Kyle, I don't know, 6 out of 10 maybe? I'd take that, just to clarify. If you want to give me a 6 out of 10, no problems. Worship, I love when all the guys are together, the combos they had. Oh, that's my favorite song, that is. Or are you like, oh, they didn't sing my song today. Kyle used too much of the Bible. He didn't use enough of the Bible. He talked about Cardiff for too long. Oh, I wish he talked more about Cardiff. Makes me feel better because they're so bad. But sometimes we get into a rhythm of coming to church and acting like we're in a show or a play, and we're going, oh, well, I like this, didn't like this. Don't worry. Is Jesus talked about? Are people's lives being transformed? And are we coming to worship God? I have my preferences. I have my tradition. But that's not biblical. Just because I might like really modern, loud, drums bashed music and someone else likes the hymns and the organ. That's all right, isn't it? It's all right that there's different people that have different preferences. That's okay. It's when we get to a point that we make that the main thing. Because the actual problem isn't that. Our problem is that our hearts are not in the right space and they're not in the right place. In 1 Samuel 16, Samuel goes to anoint the new king in the family of Jesse. Jesse's bringing out all his sons. He's like, oh, look at this one. This one's muscly, he's tall, he's good looking. He's the king. God's like, nah, I've rejected him. Next one, nah, I've rejected him. On and on and on. And Samuel's like, that's got to be, God said there's none of them. There's got to be someone left. Oh, well, it is David. He's tending the flock. He's in the field. But it won't be him because, he's not my version of what I thought the king would look like. Send him anyway. What does God say? People look at the appearance of the outward. God looks at the heart. God don't care about the lights. Don't care about the carpet. Don't care about the stage. But he does care about the heart. And he cares about the health of our heart and the posture of our heart. Not that we won't have preferences and there'll be some things that we like and there'll be some things that we dislike. And that's good and that's healthy. Because if we were all the same, there'd be a problem, wouldn't there? Of course there'd be a problem. How many times would I clash with myself if there was more of me? All the time. I'm clashing with myself in my head all the time anyway. I love what Jesus says to the Pharisees, that they have a good way of using the commands of God to fit their tradition or agenda. But surely the Bible should be molding our tradition rather than our preference molding it. Surely we should be molded by the things of God, not the things of preference. And again, there's nothing wrong with preference. Why is there so many different churches? Because we need to have so many different churches. Because it has to be a flavor, doesn't it? Because I really don't like salt and vinegar crisps. Nah, Anita's like, they're disgusting, aren't they? But I love cheese and onion. Come on. More, Lord. I love cheese and onion crisps. But I'm not saying I don't like crisps. And there's people in the community that are saying, I'm not against coming to church. But what I am against is how this church, not this church, general, how this church does it. Because I can't get behind that. That's why we have to have so many different expressions of church so that people who might not fit you will fit somewhere else. Thank you. That's why there's so many different crisp flavors. Imagine like Pringles, is Pringles in it, that's the brand. Imagine them going, right, we're only making one flavor, and you must eat the salt and vinegar crisps. You must eat that flavor. If you like crisps, you have to eat that flavor. No, they've thought with their heads, and they've gone, well, I know not everyone's going to like that flavor. Paprika. Cheese and onion. Cheese and beans they brought out. I know, weird, isn't it? But they've just brought out so many to be like, if you like crisps, we'll make a flavor for you. And if you like God, let's be a people who will make a flavor for you. Make a church for you where you can feel at home and you can feel welcome. So there's nothing wrong with preference. Because we've got to go somewhere where we feel like that's where we'll connect with God. But there's nothing wrong with someone playing the organ and singing hymns. Just as much as there's nothing wrong with having 600 people in the band all playing different music at different time. Like, if they're crazy and they love that, then that's great, isn't it? As long as someone's connecting. Ben's like, no. As long as someone's connecting. Everyone's like, no. Maybe that's just me. I wouldn't like it either. But there's got to be so many different expressions for people to feel like that they can fit in. We'd be stupid, wouldn't we, to think that every single person who comes to this church would feel like this is the place for them. Surely we'd be stupid. Because even with a good welcome, like say on the front, people will say like, oh, a good welcome's everything. And it is. But someone could have a great welcome and come in here and feel like that this is not their flavor. And that's all right. So it's all right for us to have a preference, what I'm saying, but it's not all right for us to make that the thing. The thing is Jesus. Do you know, I know loads of people feel frustrated about church. Not just Bethel. I have friends outside of Bethel, if you didn't know. I do have other friends. And there is a bit of a feeling of, since COVID, there's a feeling of, I don't know what the right word is. I don't really want to describe it, but there's a feeling of frustration, let's say that, towards church. COVID came and it changed our lives a lot, and some of us never want to talk about that again, and that would be valid, wouldn't it, if we never talked about it again. But it did change part of church, and maybe our more frustrating towards church, and that's where the deconstructing of Christians comes from, where people are trying to work out, are we doing what the Bible is asking us to do in our church? But I don't know, as I prepared this, I felt like, and this is for me as well, that the frustration that we feel towards church maybe isn't the church's fault as a whole, not just Bethel, but maybe is a cause of our own heart being hardened towards what church is. So no longer am I looking at the church, I'm looking within and I'm going, right, so I'm frustrated, but what is my issue with that? Am I the problem? Because usually the answer is yes, isn't it? I am usually I'm talking about me now, individually, personally. If there's an issue, I am usually the problem. I know. If the house is dirty, I'm the problem. I brought the football kit home yesterday. I'm the problem. But sometimes we are the problem, though, aren't we? Sometimes it's not actually what we can't control, is what we are controlling. And what have we let in? Maybe the lack of evangelism we see isn't because we don't have gifts of evangelism, but because our heart has become so hardened to the people who don't know Jesus, and we think it's someone else's job. The prophet Joel writes in the Old Testament a few poems in the Bible. He's talking about how God has, or how the Israelites have turned their back on God. Classic Israelites, not like them, is it, to do that? But he talks about how there's a swarm of locusts that eat up the land, and Joel's giving hope to the Israelites. But in it he says this, Joel 2, verses 12 and 13. Even now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God. Do you see references sometimes in the Old Testament where people are so... They're lamenting so much, they're so frustrated, they're so sad that they tear their clothes, as a sign to go, I am so broken. Obviously, we don't do that in our culture anymore. We probably hide it, actually, don't we? We probably don't even show with our sad or lamenting that much. They used to rip their clothes, and Joel's making a reference to that, and he's saying, don't rip your garments. Basically, sort your heart out, rip your heart out. Because what would happen is people would rip their garments to show people that they're lamenting, that they're sad, that they want to see this community transformed. They're praying, they're in the fasting, they're in the morning with people, but actually their heart hasn't done any of that. They've showed people that what they're doing is we're fasting, we're mourning, we're weeping, but actually their heart's not changed at all. And Joel's telling them, if you think that that's the right thing, you got it wrong. Because the actual thing is not about ripping your garments. The thing was changing your heart. Because you can say, I'm mourning, but are we really? Or I care about this community or this group of people, but do we really? Do we just say things with our lips, but our heart's not doing anything? And that's what Joel is referencing. He's saying that people are doing that, and I want you to actually rend your heart. So what is the state of your heart? Jeremiah 17, verse 9, the heart is deceitful above all else. Oof. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, guard your heart above all else, because everything you do flows from it. Okay, so we know the heart's important, and our heart sometimes can be misleading. Jesus talks about the heart, and sometimes what we do physically is not a representation of what's actually going on within us. We can do literally the exact opposite of what our heart is really saying and what is really telling us to do. Because no one actually can see our heart other than God. So no one actually knows my heart. You'll see glimpses, you can see parts, but no one actually knows. No one actually knows yours. So what is the state of your heart? Have we allowed our tradition to be too much? Have we allowed our preferences to outweigh what God's actually asking us to do? Have we forgotten our first love? I don't like to use this word, but what part of your heart is rotten? What situation have you become hardened to? If God searched your heart, what would he see? I don't care about what we see on the outside. I don't care about the attendance of you coming to church. I'm asking, if God opened your heart right now, and he can see it anyway, so it doesn't matter. If he could see your heart, what would he see? What would you care about? What would you prioritize? What would be your first love? What would be the thing you cling to in the storms? What would be your preferences that are actually traditions? Now, would he see arrogance? Would he see adultery? Would he see greed? Would he see lies? Would he see slander? Would he see lust? Would he see grudges? God says this morning, let go of the offense. Let go of the offense. Because that's taking a big part of your heart. Let go of the times that people have let you down. I always love the phrase about unforgiveness. When we don't forgive, it's like drinking poison and thinking that the other person's going to die. And the other person isn't going to die. But unforgiveness is our problem. Almost like I think if we're forgiving someone, that benefits us. It's not even about them, but it's about us. If we're forgiving someone, because it makes us feel better. And some of us have been holding on to that for too long, and it's in our hearts, and it's affecting everything we do. Every time we have an encounter with that person, or an encounter where that thing happened, it's causing emotions to flare up, and it's been happening for years. It's like they say, if you put a snake in boiling hot water, I think it's a snake, and like you went to pull it out, it bites you because it thinks that you're part of the problem, but actually you're part of the solution. And when we don't forgive people, when we leave bitterness in our heart, when we leave offense in our heart, it causes us to bleed on those people that didn't cut us. It causes us to offend those people that actually didn't do anything to us. And actually, by forgiveness, it actually allows us to feel free. And I want to feel free. And in our lives, we'll all have an element of this. I'm going to invite the band to come up, and I want to pray. Whatever issues you have, wherever your grudges are, wherever your offenses are, wherever your unforgiveness is, if that's in your heart, and if your heart is full of that, then how can we allow Jesus to bring new things into that? How can we allow Jesus to transform who we are? And the reality is we all have a part of it, don't we? We all have a section of unforgiveness. We all have a section of offense. Oh, have I never offended someone in the room? Come on. Of course I have. Is there people in the room who have offended me? No, everyone's perfect. No, of course there's people in the room that have offended me as well. But there is a difference, isn't it? Where we can be offended on a small scale, but also we can be offended to the point where that's the thing that's overtaken our heart. And that's the root of everything. Everything that goes on in my life, I can pinpoint it being that. Or maybe someone's spoken something over our life before, and I remember it, and it is literally eating who I am. And maybe it was true. I always remember when I was 18 and someone said that I was arrogant, and they were right. But I still remember it, and it still sits with me sometimes. And there's times where I've got to pray into that and go, yes, it was right, but that's not the label that God gave me. And there'll be people in the room as well where people have said things to them, and it might have been right. Sometimes people say things and it is right. But if we're holding on to that, that's affecting our heart as well. And if everything flows from our heart, we have to get our heart healthy. Our posture has to be right so that we can serve this church for Jesus. So I'm going to pray, but I'm going to just invite everyone to just close their eyes for a second. And I'm just going to pray as we just wait in silence for a bit. I want to give people a chance to hear from God, because it's much more important hearing from him this morning. And I'm going to ask a question on all of our behalfs. God, would you examine our hearts, and would you show us the things that need to come out? God, I ask that you'll come and take our greed away, our malice, our deceit, our envy, our slander, our arrogance, our lust. May you come and take our offense. May you come and take our grudges, our issues, our lies that we've held on to, the names that have been spoken over us. And God, may you break our heart so that as it starts to form, we can see the new things coming in. May you give us the gifts of the Spirit. God, we pour out kindness and joy, peace, patience into our hearts right now. God, you're in the business of transforming hearts, transforming lives. Sometimes we think too much about other people, that we don't do anything with ourselves. And God, I pray right now that this is a moment for us to deal with all of that pain. And God, however it comes out today, may it come out. So I'm going to, just as our eyes are closed still, I'm going to do a half response, and then we're going to sing. There's always an opportunity to come to the front and be prayed for, but sometimes I do think that it's helpful for us to do something when we know no one else is seeing. So if you want God to deal with something in your heart, I just want you to place your hand on your heart and just say, God, I release it. In your head, you don't have to say it out loud. God, I release it. God, I release it. So as we sing, I'd love for you guys to come out the front. If you want to receive prayer, or come to the side. I'd love to pray with you. Don't have to tell me what it's about. I honestly don't care. Unless you want to tell me, I would love to chat around that. But there'll be people at the front who'd love to pray for you if you want to go a little bit deeper in that moment of removing those things. But we're going to sing, so it'd be awesome if you guys would stand. We're going to sing Holy Forever.